on The Journal. My name is Mmatsheko Mosito, with you until the 12 o'clock hour, and we get into our journal notes since it is a Monday. So we begin by looking at the fact that Ghana and Nigeria say that they intend to pursue compensation from the South African government after foreign nationals who fled the country following the recent outbreaks of violence and the story of migration and what's been happening in the south of the continent. But before we get into that story, I'd like to welcome our regular guest for our journal notes, David Owino. He's a broadcast journalist in Kenya, and he joins me on the line. As per always, David, welcome back. It is so good to have you back on the show. Welcome.
Good morning. How are you doing?
Good, good. How are you? How's the week been?
It's a cool Nairobi mid-morning.
Yeah,
This is our winter now.
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, we're in the same boat because we are freezing as well in the southern part of the continent. But I did mention, I mean, this is quite a big story around Ghana and Nigeria and the compensation that they seek from the South African government. And I'm thinking out loud, David, around, the distinction between state responsibility and the criminal act by private individuals. I mean, where are
Yeah.
we in this conversation? Because the line could be pretty thin in this context. Hey.
Yeah, I mean, you know, interesting conversation. I looked at it. It was hilarious, especially looking at the comments that the stories evoke online. There's a much bigger story there. But not to say that I am a lawyer. This is just looking at it from my perspective as a journalist. I would say a state has certain obligations, both to, to everyone within its territory, whether they are foreigners or locals. So the lives of the people within your territory is an obligation of the state to protect. The property rights, public order, equal protection under the law. So these are obligations that extend to foreign nationals and not just your citizens. However, does that automatically mean that someone needs to be compensated every time that violence occurs? There obviously have to be certain considerations that would be made before we even say whether that qualifies for compensation or not. And if you look at any time that such things happen, the first thing I would say is, did the state fail to exercise due diligence? So, for example, did they know there was going to be violence? Did they have reasonable opportunity to prevent that violence and then failed to act adequately? The other thing that we would be considering here was their discriminatory treatment in the way that care or protection was, provided. So did the government deny protection that citizens actually received? Did they deny that protection to foreign nationals that citizens actually received? And then finally, of course, I would be looking at, were state agents directly involved in that, in the destruction that we are talking about? So really, yes, the state has responsibility, but governments will generally be expected to take reasonable measures. No government will ever assure you that there is not going to be any criminality at all within their territory. Yeah.
Okay. And I guess conversely, and I think you kind of touched on that as well. I mean, if the violence was sudden, nobody foresaw this coming, if that's even the right English, and the incidents were isolated, and the state then took reasonable measures to prevent or suppress what's to come when it comes to violence and the stakes that come with that. Compensation may not be legally required, even though harm had occurred. So I'm thinking out loud here because I want to understand, what forms can compensation take in this particular instance under international law, as it were?
Yeah, I mean, international law here will look at the government's responsibility to protect life, to protect property, and whether or not that obligation was met or not met. Um, and obviously, I would expect that South Africa has a certain, uh, should I say, law or policy that then would determine if someone is compensated or not, whether your property is destroyed in a context that requires that the state then will compensate you. What we are seeing though is people do not just blow off these issues for no reason. They blow them off because there is an underlying issue that they would want discussed, that perhaps they think an opportunity is arising for those issues to be discussed. I do not think it's just straightforward compensate or do not compensate. Because then if it is that, then we would be asking, can it be shown that the South African government breached a legal obligation owed to the people who were affected?
All right. Well,
But I think they are
yeah.
inviting a bigger conversation here. The bigger conversation of there has been undertones of, do we as Africans treat each other with dignity as we do, foreigners who are not necessarily Africans? Do we, for example, apply the same kind of rule? That is, to me, the conversation that all African nations are trying to have, and not just in reference to South Africa. And I think the issue of South Africa presents an opportunity for us to have those conversations.
100%. I have to agree with that, because especially if we're going to look at this under the lens, if you will, of international law, David, because my understanding of international law is that it recognizes several forms of reparation. And you allude to the fact that this is now an opportunity for us to look at the conversation and how the various governments interact with one another. Do we treat each other with respect in these types of contexts? And also, another reparation we could look at is restitution. Being able to restore the situation wherever possible. I don't know if it's too late for that, but listen, we'll throw that question out to the listener. We'd like to explore this question with you. Is South Africa being blamed for the actions of criminals? Or for alleged failure by the state to fulfill its duty to protect all Africans? We'd like to get your perspective on this. If you happen to catch this broadcast live as we stream audio visually on our Facebook page, we'd love for you to drop us a comment and let us know. We continue conversations with David Owino, who joins me on the line after this.
Ritmos e Cultura com Jacob Tivani. Ora, calorosas saudações, fiéis ouvintes do Ritmos e Cultura. Hoje celebramos não só a música, mas também a persistência, criatividade e paixão que continuam a inspirar gerações de músicos e ouvintes, não só em Moçambique, em África e no mundo lusófono. Ladies and gentlemen, senhoras e senhores, o conceituado Aniano Tamele in the building.
Mbilwini ka mina ku na thepu la ku pima hi lona ku va u ta swona swa ku ndzi ku rhandza kanjhani. Mbilwini ka mina ku na gezi la ku va ni ngela.
Ai! Ritmos e Cultura com Jacob Tivani. Todos os domingos das 20 às 21 horas.
Call us on +27 63 406 9126 and contribute to the conversation. The Journal with Mmatsheko Mosito.
Well, welcome back at 21 minutes past the hour 10 a.m. in Central African Time. We continue our journal notes as per every single Monday with David Owino, who is a broadcast journalist, and he joins me on the line, and we're really unpacking some big stories that took place over the weekend, and we'd like to include you in the conversations. Any quick comments, comments that you may have. We'd like to hear from you. You can tweet us as well at Channel Africa 1. Use the hashtag The Journal so that we're able to trace the conversation with you. So we look now at a French media company, Canal Plus, which has seemingly completed its acquisition of MultiChoice Group. So for the millions of Africans who subscribe to DStv, there's a question around the practical changes now that can be expected now that Canal Plus has completed its acquisition of MultiChoice. It's a big story. It really changes the landscape of media and how it operates and the consumption thereof, doesn't it, David?
It does. I mean, it's a big thing. Canal Plus has been really big in Francophone Africa. Now they are going to have, almost like a monopoly of the African narrative, if you want to say, look at it that way. Because this literally getting access to the whole continent now through this deal.
So I'm wondering now. So now that we hear, big documents have been signed and we're carrying on, will this increase investment, so to speak, in African storytelling, or will it rationalize spending across a larger media portfolio? I think that's quite an important distinction to make at this time, and I guess it will determine success or failure going forward.
Right. So these are big companies that have had big portfolios in their own rights, independently. Coming together, in my opinion, should mean a stronger streaming strategy, because the biggest competition is not your traditional pay television. The biggest competition is video on demand. It is your Netflix, it is YouTube, it's Disney, it's Amazon Prime, and all these things. There's a big competition there. And so I expect that now on the emphasis is going to be much more on streaming. It's going to be much more on on-demand viewing. In fact, I should have mentioned this first: mobile first experiences and bundled digital services. And when I say bundled digital services, you look at in Africa, one of the biggest barriers for just an explosion of how we consume media is how data is packaged and priced, because we are increasingly consuming content on mobile, and this will only increase. It's number one, and it can only increase. Now, what that means is that how we price data, how we package it, is very important for how media is consumed. And so anyone who wants to be big has to think about, how do I bundle this as a service, and not only look at myself as a media company, but as a general or all-rounded digital service provider.
Okay. This is an opportunity. I think we should look at it that way, and you're alluding to that. I'm going to ask you now to put your business journalist hat on, David, because I think the bigger idea or the big question, I guess, for us to explore in this conversation is this merger and whether it will be able to create opportunities for African filmmakers and producers, or is it going to lead to fewer bigger productions? I mean, what actually makes sense in this merger as we see it?
If you are a pro-African content person, this presents a really good opportunity. But it is not. In fact, I was just thinking about it. Initially, I was thinking, who owns the platform? But I've come to think about it this morning, and I think it's not so much who owns the platform anymore. I think it is who actually decides what we invest in,
right,
and what we carry. And so if we have really African-centric and African-focused editorial policy and editorial teams, which is what I would really expect, because now they have the muscle, then we might see a greater investment in African productions, and also an opportunity to export that to the world at scale. So
Opportunities, yeah.
there's a real opportunity there. There's a real opportunity there. I really just hope that they would see African content for what it is. It surely is world changing. And if we can just have the right investment in it, then we have an opportunity for not only consuming more of our own content across the Anglophone, Francophone, whatever phone regions, but also exporting it to the world through this platform.
100%. I think we can both agree that this is definitely, there's an opportunity. In fact, there are multiple opportunities when it comes to African filmmakers and the opportunities that can come with production. And whether they're going to lead with fewer or go bigger when it comes to production, at the end of the day, the narrative, the opportunity for us to expand our narrative and to own it is there, and for us to expand economically as well is definitely there. David, big stories. Thank you always for handling it with such grace. Appreciate your commentary this morning. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Have a good day.
Thank you. Same to you, David Owino, broadcast journalist, joining us out in Kenya.
What